Welcome to the deep dive. Thanks for bringing the source in today. It looks really interesting.
Yeah, it's quite something.
It's excerpts from William Boericke's Homeopathic Materia Medica. Specifically, it's about Arsenicum hydrogeisatum.
That's right. Also known as arseniuretted hydrogen.
Okay, and just for context, a Materia Medica, it's basically a kind of reference book from, well, this historical system of medicine, right?
Exactly. It lists the effects they observed when testing different substances.
So our mission here really is just to get into this specific text and, understand the picture it paints. It seems pretty striking.
Yeah, and maybe get a feel for what kind of details they thought were important back then.
What's immediately interesting, I think, is just seeing how these older texts put information together.
Totally. It wasn't like modern scientific analysis, obviously. It was much more about observing effects, often on, well, unhealthy people who volunteered.
Right. And this entry, Arsenicum hydrogeisatum, it's related to arsenic, the element, but the text seems to really focus on its own specific symptom profile.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It emphasizes a distinct set of reported symptoms.
Okay, so let's actually dive in. What does it say? It starts off noting a general action, kind of like arsenic, but more accentuated.
More intense, yeah.
And then it lists some really severe general stuff: anemia, anxiety, profound despair.
Wow, despair.
Yeah, a sense of like blood disorganization, bleeding from mucous membranes, collapse, intense coldness.
And prostration, that sudden weakness,
What?
right? Often with nausea.
Yeah, exactly. Intense weakness. It even mentions the skin turning dark brown. That's
Yeah.
well, that's a pretty dramatic overall picture.
Definitely sounds like major systemic failure. And you see, this reflects that core idea in these homeopathic texts.
How so?
Well, documenting the totality of effects, both physical and, crucially, mental or emotional.
Ah, right. So including despair means they were linking these deep physical problems with like emotional collapse.
Precisely. It was all part of the substance's profile.
Okay, here's where for me it gets particularly interesting and, well, quite specific.
Mm-hmm.
The text details some really unusual physical symptoms. For the head, it notes, and I quote, violent vertigo on going upstairs.
On going upstairs, not just vertigo in general.
Exactly. Tied to that very specific action and location.
Well, that specificity is, kind of a hallmark of how they gathered this information in what they call homeopathic provings, the testing process.
Right, the proving.
Observers would record pretty much every sensation, no matter how weird or minor it seemed, including like when or where a symptom popped up.
So that vertigo upstairs thing probably means it was observed like repeatedly under that specific condition.
That's the implication, yeah. It suggests a particular trigger or modality was noted.
Huh. It really makes you wonder about the actual tests. Okay, eye symptoms are also quite precise. Sunken, broad blue circles around.
Very visual description.
And the nose. This one's kind of wild. Violent sneezing. Okay, but then nose cold. Must be wrapped up with warm cloths.
A cold nose needing a warm cloth.
Yeah. It feels so, I don't know, so personal and specific. And it's listed right alongside these incredibly severe things like collapse and despair.
And that contrast, I think, is super revealing about how these records were made.
How do you mean?
Well, they weren't really filtering based on what we now call, clinical significance. Every single reported deviation, from the really serious to the just plain peculiar, was considered relevant.
To build the whole picture of the substance's effect.
Exactly, the complete picture.
Okay, moving on in the text. It describes the mouth pretty vividly. The tongue is enlarged with a deep, irregular ulcer, nodular swelling.
Specific again.
And the mouth feels hot and dry, but apparently there's little thirst.
See, again, these precise descriptions. The character of the ulcer, that unusual thirst pattern. These are the kind of details they prioritized in these symptom lists.
The source also mentions some localized effects, pustules and ulcers on the prepusing glands.
Okay.
And then there's this really odd sequence described: urine suppressed, followed by vomiting.
So tracking effects across different body systems, urinary, digestive, and noting the order they appeared in.
Right. It also notes hematuria, which is blood in the urine.
Yeah, which kind of connects back to those general blood issues mentioned earlier in the entry, doesn't it?
Good point. And right there, sort of embedded in this description of symptoms, the text gives a specific practical recommendation. Dose. Third potency.
And that's integral to a Materia Medica entry in homeopathy. That dose information tells you the recommended level of preparation.
Potency meaning The dilution level.
Yeah, basically the degree of dilution and succussion, the vigorous shaking process the substance goes through. The third potency is just a specific step.
Got it. So, okay, we've done a pretty deep dive into this fascinating bit from Boericke's Materia Medica on Arsenicum hydrogeisatum, really just guided by the details in the text itself.
Yeah, definitely.
And we've seen how it outlines this picture ranging from, those general states, anxiety, despair, the anemia, weakness, dark skin,
Right, the big systemic stuff.
all the way to these incredibly specific physical notes. The vertigo just on stairs, the sunken eyes with blue circles, the violent sneezing.
That cold nose needing a warm cloth.
Yes, that one stands out. And the specific ulcers, that weird sequence of suppressed urine then vomiting, and the blood in the urine.
And even the dose, the third potency, mentioned right there.
Yeah. So this deep dive, it was really about understanding this specific historical text, wasn't it?
Exactly. Seeing the window it gives us into how they documented observed effects back then, focusing a lot on subjective reports alongside the physical signs.
Right. So here's something for you, the listener, to think about, drawing straight from these details we build out.
Okay.
What does the text's really specific focus on symptoms like, say, a cold nose needing warm cloths, or that vertigo only when going upstairs, listed right next to things like total despair and physical collapse? What does that suggest to you about the whole nature of the observations and the principles guiding texts like this one?
Yeah, think about how everything, big or seemingly small, was apparently considered significant. Food for thought.
Definitely. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.